So welcome everyone. Welcome to the August edition of the Radius Community Call. I'm Reshma. I'm a product manager with the Radius team. I'll be hosting today's community call. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. So we wanted to extend welcome to the Radius community members. We wanted to share some updates on the community activities that we were up to in the past month. Share some updates on the Radius roadmap and release. We have two demos today. One is about configuring the custom Terraform provider, which Lakshmi will be presenting. And then we have a POC that we've been working on, which is about the GitOps support in Radius. We just wanted to share what we've built so far to get some early feedback from the community. And then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Wanted to extend welcome to everybody and cover some logistic here. This call is definitely for you. We are here to share the latest updates about Radius, what's happening behind the scene, and what's upcoming in the next release. Please utilize the chat to ask any questions you might have related to Radius. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand. We will unmute you. And also we have a dedicated Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that you can hold until the end, you can do that as well. Just for folks who are new here, we have the radapp.io Google group for all the announcements about Radius. So for folks who are new here, please join the Google group. We won't spam you as much other than just sending some regular updates on Radius release and community call invites. So please do join the group if you want updates about Radius. Next up, I just wanted to share the event that we participated in the past month. So we participated in the Backstage community session. We introduced Radius to the Backstage community, talked about the Radius dashboard, which is actually powered by Backstage. We demoed the Radius application graph, shared our learnings about what we learned with this whole integration effort, and also shared our plans on how to make this integration better. We really had a good conversation with the Backstage maintainers about the future use cases and how this integration could tie up to certain concepts within Backstage. Please do check out the video and let us know what you think. We've been wanting to share some useful content to the community. We did a series of blog posts in the past month. The first blog post here is about the Radius and Dapper integration. So if you are someone who's looking to build cloud agnostic applications, please do check out the blog post. This is useful if you are about to implement a multi-cloud strategy in your organization. The second blog post here is about contributing to Radius. So this gives detailed guidance on how you can fork, build, and contribute to the various parts of Radius. So if you're someone who's getting started with Radius or need a refresher about the whole contribution experience, do check out this blog post. The third one, which recently got published, is about participating in the Radius design process. So we have a design notes repository where we maintain both the feature spec documents and the technical design. So the feature spec documents covers the what and why of a particular feature, and the technical design covers the how, which is basically the architecture and implementation details of the feature. So if you want to participate in the Radius design process and want to influence the experience or other around the feature design, please to check out this blog post and let us know your feedback in whatever way possible. So that's about the blog post. On the roadmap side, so we are finishing the AWS URSA support. So this kind of completes the workload identity support for all cloud providers roadmap item. So you should be able to use that feature in the next release. We are starting the implementation on private bicep recipes now that the design is finalized. So that's in the implementation phase right now. And then we'll be proceeding with the technical design for the GitOps support. So we'll be covering that later in the call today about the feature specification that we've built and which covers the various scenarios from the community side. And we'll be sharing some updates on the POC as well. So those are the highlights on the Radius roadmap. So here's the link to the Radius roadmap. And if you are looking to propose any feature requests, please do propose a feature request. A Radius maintainer will take a look and review the feature and add it to the roadmap here. And also, if you have any feedback on the existing roadmap items, please do go to the issue, upload the roadmap item, or share any like comments that you have or any scenarios that you're looking to see in that particular roadmap item. So that's on the roadmap side of things. And then quick update on the .36 release. So in the previous release, we had a functionality that enables Radius to load and deploy the recipe modules, consume any Terraform provider. So this functionality has now been extended to allow for the secure configuration and handling of credentials that allows for authenticating with the Terraform provider. So this will be shared in a demo by Lakshmi today. I've also linked the how-to guide that we've authored that covers the detailed step-by-step instructions on how you can like set up a custom Terraform provider and use that in your application. And we also did some bug fixes and improvements to the Radius features. So if you have any feedback, please do engage with us in Discord and like submit your feedback as issues or bugs in the Radius repository as well. Now here's the full changelog from the .36 release. Thanks to everybody who contributed to the previous release. Now, speaking about contributing, we wanted to highlight some of the good first issues that we like like put together and like added it to a short link here. So if you're somebody new who wants to get started with contributing to Radius, good first issues are a way to get started. So the first link that covers the good first issues from all the repositories in Radius, covering all the components right from CLI to the internal microservices within Radius. And the second link is specific to Radius dashboard. So if you're somebody who's interested to contribute to the front end of Radius, then you can pick up some of the issues that are under this link. And if you need any help navigating through these issues, please let us know. We always want to make these issues as comprehensive as possible so that you know where exactly you need to go and make code changes.
And so,
okay.
Reshma,
Yeah, go ahead.
For requesting input and support on something like that, good first issues, I assume that Discord is the best place to raise those questions.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So you can start off with Discord. There's a contributing channel in Discord that you can use to ask questions. So we are pretty much active. The whole Radius team is active in Discord. So if you have any questions navigating through these issues, please do let us know in Discord. So over to the demos now. So first demo that we have here is from Lakshmi, which is about configuring custom Terraform provider. Over to you, Lakshmi.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let me know if I'm sharing a screen where you're seeing a browser.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, hi. I'm Lakshmi. I'm an engineer on the team, as I just probably said a couple of seconds ago. And a few months ago in the community call, I had given a demo on how we can configure custom Terraform providers and deploy resources using Radius. So today I'm going to expand on the same demo. And we're going to see how we can pass sensitive data stored in secrets to Terraform as part of provider configuration or as environment variables. So I'm sharing the recipe right now. This is a recipe for a PostgreSQL database. For the purposes of this demo, I've put it up on a public repository, my own repository, and there is no change to the recipe from the previous demo to now. What I just wanted to point out is we have a required providers block here, and where we've put in PostgreSQL as an entry, and we are pointing to the third-party provider for PostgreSQL, and we're putting in an alias here as well. The recipe deploys a Kubernetes service, and then the Postgres database uses that service to kind of get set up and running. And that's how it is deployed. I'm going to show the bicep file, which actually invokes this recipe. And that's where we have updates. So here we've defined, I hope you can see my screen. Please let me know if it is visible.
Yeah, maybe if you could zoom in just a bit, Lakshmi.
All right. Okay.
Great.
Right. So here we're seeing an environment that has been set up. And this is where we will configure our provider configurations. So under Terraform providers, we have the same entry for PostgreSQL. We're passing in the alias and the SSL mode. But this time we're passing in a username and password as secrets to the provider configuration. And we are also passing in, for the purposes of this demo, a host as a environment variable, which is a secret. And there's another environment variable for port, which is not a secret, just to show you a difference between the two. Now, the secrets themselves, they are stored in a secret store resource, which is a Radius resource. And this is how it is defined or declared. And we have other examples of it in our code base as well. It is used across in different use cases. But here, the important thing to know is that the secret store supports secrets that are Kubernetes secrets, the underlying resource that it does support. So we've defined username, password, and host here. And this is how we're invoking the recipe and passing in data to be able to call the recipe that is located at my public GitHub repo. All right. So I'm going to try and deploy this recipe. I have set up a Kubernetes cluster, initiated RAD, just run RAD in it. And then I'm just pasting a command that will deploy the bicep file and pass in a username and password, which are currently stored as environment variables. This will take a few seconds since it takes time for the Kubernetes service to be set up and the Postgres database to be deployed. As Reshma has mentioned, the bicep file, the recipe itself, they're all in a how-to tutorial guide that you can follow. And I think she has sent out a link, and I can paste a link in the chat here as well while this is being deployed. I think this is the one. And yeah, I think I'm going to place it here. So we have the resources deployed. I'm just gonna we have the Postgres container deployed. I'm going to see if I can describe the pod, if I got it right. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's the end of my demo. We were able to do that. We're able to pass in data securely to Terraform providers. Cool. Let me know if there are any questions. And yeah, I've posted the link to the how-to tutorial as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Thanks for the demo. I think I'm going to share the presentation here. Next up, we have the GitOps support. It's taking a while.
Yeah, I can start providing a little bit of context while that
While I bring
slide
that
is
up. Yeah.
while the slide is coming up. So Yeah, I'll give a little bit of context about the work that we're doing to integrate popular GitOps tools into Radius, some of the rationale behind that. And then we've got a super interesting demo of a POC that Will Smith will show to get a little more specific. But, I'm sure like everybody on this call knows that continuous deployment of cloud native applications, it's like a critical capability for every enterprise, but it also can be pretty challenging to operationalize that. There's a bunch of custom work to do with building and maintaining pipelines and custom scripts, which also introduces a lot of error in addition to the complexity there. So we've seen a lot of enterprises standardizing on popular GitOps tools to mitigate some of the challenges around that, particularly tools like Flux and Argo CD. And the basic idea that well, if you're in one of these GitOps kind of shops, is that with GitOps, enterprises use a Git repo that essentially serves as a single source of truth for the description of the infrastructure and applications that they're running in production. And GitOps it helps both sort of describe that and automate the process of deployment and monitoring for drift that occurs between that source of truth you have and what's actually deploying the environment. Some people, given the level of automation, think of GitOps as like cruise control for managing apps and infrastructure in production, because it kind of gets away from a bunch of that hand tuning custom pipelines. So given how popular we have seen tools like Flux and Argo CD, we've, as you would expect, heard a lot of customers who want to use Radius say, I love the value prop of Radius, like being able to describe an app and have the app graph and auto kind of self-serve deployment of infrastructure through recipes. But I already have this big investment in a continuous deployment system, whether that's Flux or Argo CD. So like, what can the Radius team do to give me sort of a better together experience so I can leverage my existing GitOps investment, but also take advantage of those cool features in Radius? And one enterprise in particular that we've worked with a lot over the last several months has said that particularly Radius integration with Flux as their preferred GitOps tool is the last kind of missing piece that's preventing them from actually going to production with their use of Radius for some of their internal workloads. So we've gotten super excited about this integration because it'll free up production usage of Radius. So the team's been pretty focused on a couple of things. One is drafting a feature spec that we can kind of socialize and make sure that we're thinking about GitOps integration in the right way, given the kind of requirements and needs that the community has. And in parallel with speccing out that work and getting feedback, as mentioned, Will Smith has been working on a POC to kind of flesh out how might we kind of design and build some of this work. So we'd be really interested to hear both, input from the community on like, what's your view of the priority of GitOps integration with Radius? What's your preferred tool, Flux or Argo CD or something else? And in particular, input on this feature spec that's very much a draft, and we would love input on kind of what we got right and what we got wrong. As Reshma mentioned earlier, we've got a pretty well-defined design process. We have these specs posted in the design notes repo. So we'd love for you to take a look at the spec and just give input directly in line. If you need guidance on kind of how to provide that input, check out Reshma's good blog post on how to contribute to Radius designs for this feature and anything else. But so that input would be great. And then once Will walks through the POC, then any observations you have about that early kind of work would be great. A little bit of context that you'll see in that feature spec, there's about kind of the way we're thinking about GitOps integration. One, you'll see in the spec called out the personas that we're targeting. And as you would expect, when we're talking about integration of tools like Flux and Argo CD to Radius, we basically got like 3 personas that we're thinking about. One is the infrastructure operator, the folks that configure and manage GitHub repos for a given organization. That's the first persona. The second is application developers, right? They actually build the applications and they store their files in a GitHub repo, and they deploy GitOps to kind of auto deploy and monitor their apps. And the third persona that we've thought a lot about, in particular based on input from the community, is site reliability engineers. So that's the folks that take an application, maybe they check in files to get to say customize an application. They might need to patch an application to address some live site issue. So operators and developers and SREs, we've thought a lot about in terms of how they likely will want to use their GitOps tools in the context of managing Radius. And as you can imagine, like for an enterprise team that is say a Flux shop, if you think about those different personas, the IT operator is going to want to be, they need to install Radius and configure, right? So they need to be able to do that with the GitOps tools that they're familiar with. So we're thinking through that scenario, that sort of installation and configure Radius. Once Radius is installed and configured, then some combination of operators and developers is going to need to deploy and manage Radius assets with that same tool chain, right? So if it's a Flux shop, I need to be able to deploy and manage, say, Radius environments and applications and resources in the way I'm used to deploying and managing things today. And then lastly, for that SRE, right, if I use Flux today to patch and customize applications, then I need to be able to check in files to get with the same workflow that I use with Flux or Argo CD today. So at a summary level, those are kind of the 3 personas and the 3 scenarios that we've been digging into. Like I said, I think we have a long way to go in terms of our ability to improve both the spec and the design as we go forward, but that's kind of the high level things we've been focused on. And then to see some of the POC work about how Will is evolving our thinking about how to approach some of the design and implementation, I can hand off to Will and he can walk through kind of a demo of some of the POC. Does that work for you, Will?
Perfect. Let's do it.
Awesome.
All right, here we go. If I'm not sharing, let me know or something.
I see it.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, thanks, Jonathan. As you mentioned, we have this feature spec committed to our design notes repo, and this is where, if you're unfamiliar, all of our designs, our public designs, are going to go, including feature specs and technical designs. So this is a great place to get involved with, reading what we're up to, as well as commenting and getting towards the direction that you want us to go by providing your input. So in this case, this one is the feature spec for GitOps, and like Jonathan mentioned, we have a few user personas that we've thought really hard about. Namely infrastructure operators, developers, and SREs, and a few scenarios that we think, from talking to people in the community, that we think would be super useful for everybody. So for the first 2 scenarios, or I guess I'll go through all of them real quick, just to give like a debrief on really what we're trying to accomplish. So the first scenario is, as an operator, infrastructure operator, I can install and configure Radius with my GitOps tool of choice. In this demo, I'm going to be just saying Flux. Of course, we want to build the support for Argo CD as well, and we want to make integrating these kinds of tools as easy as possible. So this demo is for Flux. in specific, but just know that we do want to make this as extensible and as easy as possible. So, so this, of course, is we want to be able to configure Radius exclusively using Flux. So we'll demo that. And also, the second one is as an operator or a developer, I can deploy and manage Radius environments, recipes, applications, etc. via my GitOps tool set. So this, of course, is, you have some sort of configuration that Radius understands, and we need to make a configuration that your GitOps toolset understands, in this case, Flux. And so when you author Radius environments, recipes, etc., we need to be able to apply those changes onto your Kubernetes cluster. So the end goal of this is you can specify everything in Flux and tell Flux, hey, this is what I want to install. I want to install Radius, and I want to install Radius and configure it in the way that our team specifies. And then I want to be able to create Radius specific resources like environments, applications, etc. So this is what I'm going to be demoing today, and I guess I'll get started. A side note is that the last scenario in this document, which is specifically talking about the SRE persona, is something that we think is super important, and we've talked to people in the community about. And this is absolutely something that we are planning on supporting, namely the ability to edit customized configurations of your application. And so there's some specifics in this doc about this scenario. I won't be demoing it today because this is a pretty early proof of concept, and I really think it's super important to get down these two scenarios, because I think people are going to be a lot more interested in what we have to say here, and just know that future work is coming in this area. We have lots of stuff planned. This is a big feature area, and this is just getting started. So here's my plug again to go engage with with us on Discord or in the feature specs themselves, anywhere we're publicly available, and talk to us about what kinds of things you like to see in this area, because we like to learn from you. So without further ado, let's get into the demo. So I'm going to start with a empty Kubernetes cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and create a kind cluster. What do you call it? Cluster. That's the command, right? There's so many of these Kubernetes tools, I forget what the syntax is for the command line. So I'm going to create a bare empty kind cluster. And afterwards, I'm going to install some Flux configuration. So I'm going to run this command, and then while the command is running, I'm going to talk about what it's doing. So this is a command that may be familiar to you all if you are familiar with Flux. So this is Flux Bootstrap GitHub. Basically, Flux is going to pick up configuration from the GitHub repository that I specify. In this case, Will Dav Smith Radius Flux demo. I wonder what's in there. We're going to set it to our Kubernetes cluster that we just created, and the path is clusters dev. So we'll see what that means in just a moment. But let's go ahead and run this. It's going to connect to GitHub at this repository that I specified. So github.com Radius Flux Git. So this is the repository that I'm connecting to, and I'm going to do a brief overview of what's going on in here and why we told Flux to connect to this one specifically. So by the way, a side note, this is not anything unusual. I forked it from this official example by Flux, which has pretty much the same exact setup, where you basically have, oh, this is a good place to look. So you have some infrastructure, and then you have some Flux configuration for your clusters, and then you have your applications that you want to run on the cluster. In this case, the applications that they have are Helm releases, In our case, spoiler alert, they're going to be Radius applications, but the infrastructure and the clusters are mostly the same. In the case of this example, they have some ingress stuff and cert manager, and then in the infrastructure and in the clusters, they have the actual configuration of the cluster. So let's go look at actually what's going on. In our clusters, these are things that are basically auto-generated by Flux. When you run Flux Bootstrap, you can connect. And this is essentially just your configuration of Flux itself onto the cluster. You can see that all these things, it creates like a namespace and, you know, network policies for Flux. So I didn't do anything special here. This is exactly standard. And in our infrastructure, let's talk about this for a second. We have a few customizations that point to things in this part of the repo: infrastructure radius, something, right? So let's pop over there, see what's going on. Here we have some customization for other things that we want to install in the cluster besides Flux. In this case, we wanted to install Radius, right? So Radius, as you may know, is exposed via Helm chart just as easily as the CLI. So so we specify that we want to install the Radius Helm chart to this namespace. And here's where we actually declare the versioning and all that stuff. So in this case, I'm installing our latest version of Radius, and I'm adding a couple extra values that we expose in our Helm chart because I made changes to this part of our project. So don't worry too much about this. But if we check our actual state of the cluster, let's see what happened. So we see that this is exactly what we expected to see. We installed Flux, and we configured Flux to also install Radius from Helm chart. So you can see that Radius now has, you know, all the pods that we expect to see normally. But if the eagle-eyed among you may notice, there's another one. There's a new one here, this Radius Flux controller. This is something that we don't have in Radius today. It's an extra thing that I've added for the purposes of this demo, and I'll talk about what it does in just a moment. So that's how we set up our infrastructure. And now we have Radius installed on the cluster. But after this point, we really want Radius to be able to do something. So let's talk quickly about the other thing that was in the cluster definition, which is the apps. So in the standard, let's see, the thing that I forked from, let's look at what the apps are. So the apps here are, there's like a production and a staging configuration for it. I'm not too worried about that right now, but in this case, it's a Helm repository that hosts, you know, a Helm configuration for the app that users want to deploy. So we, of course, want to be able to deploy a Radius application instead. So let's go back to my fork, and let's look at what's in the apps.yaml. So we can see that it's a customization for a Git repository at the path apps Radius app. So let's go take a look at what's in there. All right, so here's the important part of it, the same thing that I showed before, but we're pointing to this Git repository, Radius Flux app. And if we go there, we can see that this is not a Helm. This is not a Helm application or anything like that. This is a full-on Bicep app with basically no changes from your normal Radius plus Bicep workflow. So we have an environment here which declares or which specifies a recipe. And we have a Radius application, a Radius container, and you can see the recipe connection here with Redis. So this is of course our standard getting started application that I'm sure many people are familiar with. Here we go. and it's packaged just as like a normal bicep file. But we'll see that when we make changes to our cluster configuration, because remember this repo Radius Flux demo that I was just showing is your cluster configuration. And you can add a Git repository to point to exactly this. And so when we add this customization, we expect to see that that a new source is added. And ideally, what we would want, if we built all the code correctly, is for all of these Radius things to be deployed onto the cluster. So that's the bulk of the work that we want to do on the Radius side is do that part of the translation. So let's go ahead and deploy it, or not deploy it. We really just need to add this to Git. So I'm just adding this configuration to Git, and Flux will do the rest for us. So now if we check our Git repository and our apps, you can see that this is uncommented, and we have now this Git repository that points to this one, and we want to see these app definitions deployed in the cluster. So while Flux tries to reconcile these, it might take a second, but we can see, let's see, Git repositories. Oh, see if we, oh, can't spell, of course. All right, so we can see Flux reconciled it 22 seconds ago. And now we have this Radius application that presumably a developer would author in your organization. Of course, in this case, we have this environment declared in the file, which would probably be more of an infrastructure operator concern. But you can see how you can start to separate all of the different concerns of the application using Flux, right? So this repository is primarily for all of your setup of your cluster, and this one is for your actual application definition. So you can see how you could easily extend this and move things around. Remember, this is a proof of concept. Yeah, so now that our Git repository is added, our shiny new Radius Flux controller is going to know what to do about these things, and then the Radius controller itself will pick up and be responsible for the deployment of this application. And right now, I'm just going to let that kind of be magic while I show you that it actually worked. So we have some things on our cluster. And remember, we didn't really do any sort of rad deploy, anything like that. This configuration from Radius just got picked up and applied onto the cluster by Flux. So let's see what's actually going on here. I'm gonna go open the Radius dashboard, which we probably all know and love, and we can see that we have our demo application and our demo environment deployed as we specified in this Radius bicep file. So yeah, we have everything that we wanted, and we can go ahead and I've already port forwarded the application just to make sure that it's working. And so let's load that up. And you can see that we even have a connection to Redis that we specified in the recipe. So yeah, that's really cool. And I'm going to quickly get into the way it works without getting too detailed, because we haven't exactly written the technical design yet. This is a really early proof of concept that is pretty hacked together. But I want to talk briefly about how it works, because I'm sure many of you are probably pretty interested. So, not there. What's new with today? So, as I mentioned, we have the Radius Flux controller and the Radius controller itself, and these are the things that are primarily responsible for the reconciliation and deployment of these resources. So we've exposed a new resource definition called it's application deployments. called application deployments. And we can see that we have one of these on our cluster. And if we actually inspect it, man, that is a long word. All right. It's literally just our template, which is really cool. We've written a Kubernetes custom resource definition, which can basically translate the bicep that you want to provide and into the something that Flux can understand, right? So Flux can only understand Kubernetes resources, and this is the middle ground there. So the general flow for how this works in this hastily written Excalibur is here. So the Radius Flux controller is responsible for doing that translation step, compiling the bicep file into an application deployment. And this Radius controller will handle the reconciliation of all of these application deployment custom resources. So if whatever the state is on the cluster of your the application deployments that you have, you know, from GitHub or wherever else, the Radius controller will be responsible for creating these resources, deleting these resources, keeping them up to date, etc. And from there, you know, it's just standard Radius stuff, right? We submit them for deployment onto the cluster, or deletion, of course. So yeah, so that is the demo. And thank you all for tuning in. This is super early stuff, but it's also super exciting, and we know a lot of people in the community are excited about it. So yeah, thanks for popping in. I will be around to answer questions, and I'm sure everyone else will as well. So thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Will. Thank you for the demo. Thanks, Jonathan, for setting some context about the work. Do we have any questions around GitOps before we move on? I think we have a comment. Just a comment on deploying Radius bicep through Flux box.
Let's see. Yeah. Bicep is common to both Azure and Radius. If Bicep is picked up, Radius Flux controller and can only deploy Radius defined Bicep resources. So you, as long as, I mean, remember that what we have today is a proof of concept, and you're probably right that it wouldn't work because I didn't set up the Azure provider for Radius. But in the future, once we have this feature built out, and you configured your Azure provider the way that you want to in your you know, in your Radius and cluster configuration, you should be able to declare and deploy Azure resources as well as AWS resources. Anything that you can do in Radius, generally speaking, right? It would just be a matter of setting up the Azure provider correctly, which I didn't demo any of that stuff. It was just Radius specific things. But there shouldn't be anything stopping us in the future from enabling that scenario.
There's also another question about the compatibility with Customize, and it's currently supported by Flux.
Yeah, compatibility with Customize. Yeah, so so I what I'm assume you mean is Customize for patching things in production, and we're not planning on supporting. Yeah, so we're not planning on supporting that at the moment. Here in the feature specs somewhere, let me try to find it. Our at least what we're planning on right now is that SREs and otherwise are going to be able to patch their applications using Bicep. So imagine, you know, you need to increase the replica count of your application or something like that. That should be exposed as a parameter in Bicep, and then you can change that in Bicep. So if we get into supporting Customize for patching Radius applications. We think that it might be what do you call it? Maybe like a little bit difficult for us to really like maintain that. Brian, do you have a better way of explaining that?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear more from Nuno about this, because the challenge is, what are you patching exactly? Like if we wanted to teach Customize to patch a bicep file, that would just feel very strange, right? Like Customize doesn't support that today. Bicep also has really rich support for parameterization. So like if you want to define parameters and then have defaults for those parameters that apply in different, like all the things that people use Customize for typically are pretty well supported with Bicep, like all those patterns work. The question is, if we wanted to support it, like what would the patch actually look like? And then like what document is the patch being applied to? So I'd be curious to hear more. And we'll see. I guess Nuno's in chat, so we'll see if he gets back in chat.
He says we can dive deeper into Customize at a later date as well.
So I'm just writing comments. Let's see. Yeah, so this is just a screenshot of the the feature spec where wow, that showed up so small. Where we have the bicep params file, and that parameter is defined in your actual radius bicep definition. And so when you update the bicep params, you can automatically change the application that's deployed. So that's what we're working on for now. Of course, like, yeah, this is really good feedback to get for us, though. That's what we want to hear. Let's see. So is the one that just came in. My understanding is that we could absolutely make this work. Radius does support plain Azure Bicep, and if you set things up correctly in Radius, you could completely be able to deploy something like this storage account. It doesn't have to be Radius resources. Or in the short and succinct words of Ryan, that works.
Cool. So we are towards the end. Any other questions? Not just on GitOps, but any other questions that you have on Radius in general? Cool. So just wanted to share some quick links here. Engage with us on Discord, star our GitHub repo. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a Google group, Radius.io, to get the latest Radius news. We'll be back soon with our next community call date. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or need help with Radius, please engage with us in Discord. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to the Radius team for the awesome demos. Thanks everyone.